In this video, we are going to see how to create a very simple dashboard in Excel using very different features, such as a bar chart, some cards, slicers to filter the data, and everything starts from a dataset. It doesn't matter what type of dataset you have, because it's going to work. We are going to learn how to prepare the dataset, how to properly format the dataset, and then how to create pivot tables from the dataset, how to add those dynamic filters where we can click on the button and automatically the whole dashboard is going to be filtered for us. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video, and remember, I'm going to leave this dataset in the description so you can download for free and follow the video along with me. So let's get started. To get started and create any type of dashboard or analysis in Excel, we need to have first a dataset. And in my case, I have a very large one. I have many different columns and several different rows. To be more precise, 1,201 rows. And of course, you can also download this Excel file. Just go to the video description, click on the link, and download this dataset. That way you can follow along the video with me. And it's completely free, okay? Just click on the link, download the dataset, and then come just right back. Here I have a sales report, okay? But doesn't matter if you have a different type of dataset, if you have a purchasing dataset, a human resources, logistics, or a hospital dataset, because it's going to work. The important thing is you need to have a dataset, columns and rows. If you have that, you can analyze this type of data in Excel throughout a dashboard, throughout pivot tables, throughout any type of formula or functions. But in this video, I want to be very quick, not because I'm not going to give valuable information. No, I'm going to give you guys very interesting information, but because it's not difficult to analyze any data in Excel. It's kind of easy. Right here, I have a sales report. So what I like to do first is I try to understand my data set. In this case, I already saw that I have many columns and many rows. Let me go through, starting from the first column all the way to the last one. In the first column, I have the order ID, and in the second, I have the order date. But if we pay attention here, this is why I like to scan through the columns to check if the informations are properly formatted. And I already see that in column B, we don't have the properly formatting values because we supposedly need to have dates in column B. But tell me, what is this date right here? 45985. I don't know, so we need to change the formatting of those values. So to do that, let me click on column B, let me go to the Home tab, and on General, I can click on this down arrow and go straight for short date. Excel is going to change the formatting. Now I can see month, days, and years. And of course, I could also change the format to long date, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't want to see the name of the week, such as Monday, November 24th, and etc. I don't think it's necessary. It's too much. So let me go back to short date, because I think this is enough. And this is why also, guys, I think it's important to scan through the columns and check whether or not we have the correct formatting. Because using the proper formatting is going to help us analyze this data. All those text columns are correct. Column C, region, state, city, department, product category, and etc. Let me go all the way to the right. Maybe right here where we have numbers, we may need to change the format. Let's say units sold. It's actually quantity, so I don't need to change because it's already correct. But if you want, you can go to the general and change to number. That's it. The only thing that happened here, instead of having the even number, let's say 18, of course, we still have the even number, but now we have 2 decimal places. I don't think it's necessarily change anything, but now we have the number format. For the unit price and the gross sales, I think it's very important to change the format and use currency or accounting format. In my case, I'm going to use accounting, but what is actually the difference between account and currency? Accounting separates the dollar sign from the number, and the currency make them couple together. It's just aesthetic. It's not going to change anything in the structurally wise, let's say. Let me go back to accounting and increase quite a bit the width of those columns. Payment method, order status, and delivery priority. Everything now seems fine. Okay, so we just adjust the data set. Now everything looks correct. Another thing you can do that I like always to do is I click in on this small triangle at the top because it allows me to select all the cells at once, all the columns, all the rows. And then I go to the Home tab and align everything in the middle and vertically and horizontally. I center that information. Now click on the dataset itself, let's say anywhere in the dataset. We need to convert this range into a table, but why should I not use a range in Excel like we have right here and use a table instead? Because I think a table has many benefits that I'm going to show you in just a minute. So click on the dataset, go to Insert, and then Table. Excel is going to open up this dialog box. You can mark the option My Table Has Headers, because of course we have order ID, order date, region. Those labels are our headers. Then you can click OK. Now we have a table in Excel. And why I think using a table is the best option when we want to analyze the data set. It doesn't matter if we are doing dashboards or just pivot tables, because the range grows automatically. What I mean by that is, if I go to the last row of my data set, let's say 1201, this is the last row, but I want to add a new information. I can go to the first blank row underneath my table, and if I start to insert a new information, let's say order /2025 /01201, enter, the table updates automatically, and now I have a new row that is part of the table. And this new table that grows automatically, it's also important because when we are doing pivot tables, charts, dashboards, or any other type of analysis using the table range, let's say we are using here the region as a range, as our criterion. Region before was until the row 1201, right? But now it's going up to this new row, and the range updates automatically when we are using a table. So this is why I think it's very important to use a table. And on top of that, every time you add new information, the table recognizes this new information and updates the range of the table itself to include this new information. And on top of that, guys, let's say now it's very easy to insert a pivot table to make analysis. The pivot table is the tool of Excel that can help us reorganize this table. Because let me give you an example. Let's say I want to know how much was the gross sales by payment method. Okay, it's going to be kind of a trick question to solve, to answer, because we're going to need to use maybe some formulas to extract only the unique payment methods. And then with the sum ifs, we need to add up only the values that refer to credit card and then only the values to digital wallet and etc. But by using pivot tables, we don't need to do any of those formulas because the pivot table does the formula for us in the background. We don't need to know how to do the formulas. We just need to click, hold, and drag the fields into the pivot table. And that's it. Very simple. We tell the pivot table which columns we want to analyze. Let's say gross sales per payment method. Very easy. So this is why I always like to go with the pivot tables. And because we have a table, if we go to Insert and then Pivot Table, the Pivot Table tool immediately recognizes our range. That is the table 1. The table 1 is the standard name for the first table we have in Excel. And this is my first table because I didn't have any other tables in this workbook. So the first table is the table 1. This is the name we can see right here in this formula bar, right? So the whole range is selected, and this is very interesting. This is a good advantage to use a table instead of a regular range. because pivot table recognize this entire table as a range. And even though in the future we add more rows, more information, the pivot table will continue to understand the whole range. Okay, table 1, I want to, of course, add a new worksheet. Click OK. And what the pivot table new worksheet stands for is, it's going to add a new tab for you here at the bottom. And by the way, we can change the name of those sheets. Let's say the first one, sheet number 1, I can right click it, go to rename it, and maybe we can give it a name such as dataset. Or if you want to be more specific, sales dataset, or any other type of dataset you are using. And as the sheet number 2, right click, go to rename. I want to call it pivot tables, or maybe analysis, and etc. Here in the right, we can see the pivot table. It's being called pivot table number 1 because again, it's the first pivot table. It's the same logic as the table. So the first pivot table is pivot table 1, the second will be pivot table 2, and etc. All the way here to the right, we have a dialog box, a very large one, that is called pivot table fields. Basically, we can see on those items the columns that we have on our dataset. So if you check those names match with the dataset, order ID, order date, region, state, city, department, and etc. All the way down here, we have the pivot table fields, such as filters, rows, columns, and values. Basically, we take a information up here, click on it, hold, drag, and drop within one of those fields. Another interesting way you can organize those fields is by clicking in this gear icon and change to sort from A to Z. Now it's easier to look up information. Let's say city is the first information because the organization we did from A to Z. But to be honest, I don't like to use this organization right here. I always like to go with the normal one, sort in data source order, because it's going to follow the order of our columns. If we check right here, region is the third information because in the data set, the original one, 1, 2, 3, the third column is the region. So the region is the third information. That way, the third information right here is going to be the region. And something that is important to be mindful, if you click off to the side of the pivot table, let's say in any blank cell that is not in the area, within the area of the pivot table, the panel to the right disappears. Let's say I go back to the pivot table. Now I have this panel. If I click off, I don't have the panel, right? So we need to be mindful about that because sometimes we are working with Excel pivot tables and we may notice that we don't have the panel anymore. So maybe this is the why. And if you are working with the panel and then you close this panel right here, it's not going to go back, return if you click off and on the pivot table. So what you need to do in this case, you need to right click on the pivot table and then you need to go to show field list. This is how you can retrieve those fields. But anyway, let's say I want to start my analysis. And the first thing we can do is think about the big numbers. And what I mean by that is, let's take values, numbers, because we have a lot of information. Let's say state, region, city, department. But department, for example, is not a number itself. It's just texts. Maybe we have as department, electronics, office supplies, and etc. Those are not numbers. So I always like to start with numbers because then I can be more specific. Let's say I want to take here the gross sales. I can click on it, hold, and drag and drop within values. Automatically, Excel is going to sum this gross sales for me. And if I go back to the pivot table, I can see the total amount. 386,000 roughly, right? So this is our gross sales. Now I can be more specific. I already know the total, but I can create more specificness. Let's say I can take here the department, click, hold, and drag and drop within rows. But why rows and not columns and not filters? I'm going to show you in just a minute why I choose rows. But by using rows, Excel is going to take each department one by one and stack them in the rows. So we have here the first department, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and so on, but by being organized by rows. So now I know the gross sales per electronics, for example, per department. Very simple to use. And if I change, instead of use the rows, click on the rows, click, hold, and drag upwards here on the columns, change the area that was being used. Instead of rows, now I'm using columns. The pivot table is going to organize this data using columns. So now I have the categories one to the side of another. But I actually don't like this layout right here. I prefer the other one. And let's say just to make the last configuration, take department, click, hold, and drag into filters. Let's see what's going on in this case. Now we have again the sum of gross sales, like we did in the beginning of the analysis. But we have here at the top a filter button. If you click on this filter button, we can choose only one specific category. Let's say sports. Click OK. The gross sales underneath is going to automatically show us the data only for this specific category we filtered. And if I change again to electronics and then go OK, one more time, it's going to be filtered. And if I go again to the filter and then click all and then OK, it's going to show everything, all the values. So this is basically the difference between filters, columns, and rows. But anyway, if you want to summarize the values, you want to group those values together, addition of the values or the average or anything in this stuff, you always need to use the values. And of course, you can also combine those areas. You can use both filter with columns, or you can use filters coupled with columns coupled with rows. You can use all those areas, all those fields. But let me again take the department, click, hold, and drag into rows, because now we know how much we sold, the gross sales for department. But I always like to start with something, as I said, with just one single number. So let me go to the department itself, into the rows, click on it, and then remove field to remove that information. Now we have only the sum of gross sales. On top of that, I also want to analyze in the same pivot table. It doesn't need to be a separate one. I want to go with units sold. Click on the units sold, click, hold, and drag within values again. Because Excel is going to summarize the total of units sold. And as we can see here, 17,000 units sold. On top of that, I want to use one more analysis. And again, I want to use the gross sales again. Click, hold, and drag and drop right on the values. But we are going to have the gross sales twice, in the first column and in the second one. Of course, it's not necessary, because why should I repeat the same information? It's making no sense at all, right? And yes, I agree with you, but the thing is, we can change the second column to, instead of apply a sum, to apply a average of this value. But why should I apply the average instead of the sum? Because by using the average, we can know what is the average for the rows that we have, the average sales, the average ticket, for example. Let's say in this raw data set, if we go to the first order, we can see the amount that is 871. The second, 395. The third, 580, and etc. So we have different values, different amounts. But what is the average? What is the average? I think the average is important to be a reference. Let's say every order I have, I know more or less the average of the sales. So this is why I think it's important to know the average. And on top of that, we can learn how to change, instead of use a sum, to use something else. We can go straight to the values field and click on the field we want to change. So this field right here, the third one, click on it, go to value field settings, and Excel is going to open this dialog box for you. And instead of use a sum, we could also use a count. What a count does, is going to count how many appearances we have for this specific criterion. And in this case, count, let's say you have 10 different rows into your data set. If you have the gross sales column, all the cells with some values, it cannot be empty cells, but if you have something, Excel is going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. How many information we have within this specific column. But I don't want to count those values, but it can also be something very interesting to do because we can know how many rows we have in the data set. So maybe it's interesting to count, let's say, how many orders we have. We can also use the maximum value to return the largest value. We can use the minimum value to return the smallest one, and etc. But in this case, I want to go with average. So click on average, click OK, and Excel automatically change. Now we can see the total amount, the total units, and also the average ticket, for example. And on top of that, guys, I also want to include one more column here. Let me go again to gross sales. Doesn't matter. I can use gross sales. I can use payment method. I can use any other column. The only thing that we need to be mindful is the column that we are using right now needs to be, it can't have blank cells. That's it. It cannot have blank cells. And I think it's more intelligent to use a column that we know for sure there isn't blank cells on it. And in this case, I'm going to use again the gross sales. Click, hold, and drag within values again. But instead of, for the third time using the sum of the gross sales, I'm going to change it to the count function. And then OK. We can see right here we have 1,200 different rows. And on top of that, guys, you don't need to rely on those traditional or extender names Excel is going to give you. You can change the names. Let's say you just click on cell A3 where you have the first label and you can change it. Let's say I want to call it total amount. The second column, I want to call it total quantity. The third one may be average ticket. And the fourth one, we can go with the count of the rows. So quantity of orders. Enter. That's it. Very interesting. Now, with those meaningful names, I know exactly what's going on here. And if you go to the pivot table fields, you can immediately see that those fields are matching our labels. This is something very interesting about the pivot tables. And okay, now we have our first analysis. What we can do is, let's say we already have those analyses that are considering the whole data set. But let's say I don't want to analyze the whole data set. I just want to analyze a specific month, January or February or March or December, and etc. How can I do that? How can I filter my data set based on months? Because if we pay attention in the data set itself, I don't have any specific column that is referring to months. We can do two things here. We can specifically rely on the column B, order date, because by using many different dates, the pivot table can smartly convert those ranges into some different groups. The date itself, that is the value we have, but also in months, years, and etc. But I don't want to rely on the pivot table itself because not always it works. Even, let's say, if you have a small data set with only a couple of different dates, maybe it's not going to work that well properly. So I always like to add some extra columns in my data set. And you can do the same. And because we are using a table in Excel, today we have 1,200 rows. But if tomorrow, next week, next month, you add more information, more rows, another benefit of a table is that this extra column that we are going to add right here, it's also going to grow automatically as the table grows. Let me go to the first blank column to the right, and I'm going to call it month, enter. And the next one, year, enter. Excel has two formulas that can help us with this situation to help us handle the conversion of a date into month and a year. It's very simple, equals, and then month. Let me double click in this first formula, 1, 2, to select. And as the serial number, that is our argument, we can straight go to the first date. If we pay attention to the formula, Excel is not going to select the coordinate of the cell. Let's say in that case, order date might be column B2. It's not referring to cell B2, but to order date. That is the reference of the column itself. So let me hit enter. Okay, immediately the table returns the whole months for us, all the way down to the last row. And we can do the same for the year. And as I said before, guys, if you add a new row or 2 or 3, it doesn't matter, any number of rows you want to add here, the table is going to continue to calculate the months for you. For the year, we can do something very similar, but instead of use the equals month, we can use equals year. Double click on the formula, 1, 2, and as the serial number again, the same we can do. Go to order date, click on it, hit enter, and OK. And matter of fact, I don't like to let those columns like this using the standard formatting, let's say, standard layout, because I don't want to think those columns are just part of the dataset, but I like to know those columns are custom made, let's say. So I always like to select all those values. You can see if you hover over the label, you have this black arrow pointing down. You can click on it and drag to the right to select both of those columns. And in the Home tab, you can change the fill color. Let's use a grayish color, maybe this one, dark gray. Now we know we have some formulas in those two columns, right? Let me go back to the pivot table and take a look on those information fields. We cannot see those new extra columns we added. But why is that? Because every time you add new information in the table, the pivot table is not going to be automatically updated. Of course, if you are using a newer version of Excel, maybe Excel 365, like myself, you of course have the option to automatically update the pivot table. However, because a lot of people don't use the newer versions of Excel, I'm going to show you how to update the pivot table by yourself. You can go to the Data tab, and under here in Queries and Connections, you can go to Refresh All and then Refresh All. Once you click on it, the pivot table is going to recalculate itself with the new data. Right here is not going to change anything, right? Because we didn't add a new amount, a new quantity. No, we just add an extra column to the right. So the real difference is going to be here onto the fields. As we guys can see, now we have the month and the year. And just to make it clear, you don't need to update each pivot table you have manually, because once you click on data, refresh all, and then refresh all the pivot tables you have within this Excel workbook is going to be automatically updated for you, right? So everything here is going to be automatically updated. Okay, guys, now we have those two extra columns. And what we can do with those two extra columns, we can, let's say, take the month, click, hold, and drag within filters, and also take the year, click, hold, and drag within the filters, because now we can filter by year. But of course, in this data set, I only have the 2025 year. But using the months, I can filter by whatever month I want. Let's say March. Click on the number 3, go to OK, and the values are going to automatically be updated. If I go to December, that is the number 12, click OK. Again, the information updates automatically. But let me show all information, and I don't like, to be honest, to use the filters within the pivot table. What I like to do is I like to use slicers. But why is that? Because I think slicers is a more modern, a more professional way to filter data. But why? Because it's easier. It's better looking, and it's also easier. You just click on a button. Very, very simple. And on top of that, you can move it around. You can create a pivot chart, and to the side of the pivot chart, you can use this slicer. So we can couple two very interesting ideas using a chart to represent the pivot table, and on top of that, use the slicer to filter the chart. So let me show what I mean. Let me click on month here, remove field, and also remove the year field. if I go to the pivot table, it's very important to select the pivot table. I want to go to pivot table analyze. That is the new tab that we have every time we select the pivot table. We have under the filter tools, insert a slicer. Click on it, Excel is going to open up this new dialog box. And right here, we can select any option we like to filter our pivot table. Let's say, as we did before, I want to filter by month and by year. But because I only have 1 year, I don't think it's necessary to select the year. I may just stick with month and then, okay. Excel is going to add up here this dialog box or this field that we can click, hold, and move it around, this frame. And using this frame right here, let's say I click on the second number, the number 2, that it refers to February. The data set, all the values are going to immediately be filtered for me. But why is that? Because this slicer is nothing less than a filter than we have in the pivot table, just like that. January, February, March, April, and so on. We can just click straight in the month we want, and the pivot table is going to automatically be updated. And if we click in this little icon right here, we can clear the filter. And on top of that, we can also change the layout of this slicer. If we click on the slicer, we can see we have a new tab that is called a slicer. And all the way here to the right, we have an option called columns. Right now, we are using only one single column, or in other words, in the same line, in the same row, we have only one information. But if we change to 3, for example, it indicates that in the same row, we have 3 different information, as we guys can see right here. In the same set of rows, we have 3 different information. Now it's easier to select the values we are looking for. I think I want to use 4 information, yeah, and also increase the height quite a bit. Let's say 0.4 to make the buttons taller. And using those small circles that are called fill handles, we can click on it and drag upwards, downwards, inwards, outwards, and increase and change the area of our slice. Let's say I'm going to leave it away. And also by the slicer section, I can change the font color to this dark blue that I think I like very much. Okay, guys, because now we have the slicers, we can start to create our dashboard itself. And by dashboard, I mean, we can create some charts, a couple of more analysis, and maybe use 1 or 2 more slicers to help us filter the data. And we don't need to look at the pivot table to analyze our data because we can use the charts. And I don't want to, matter of fact, using this tab right here, this sheet, to see the charts, the pivot tables, the slicers. I don't want to clutter too much because I think it's going to be overloaded. I want to create a new sheet. So click on the plus sign to add a new sheet, and we can rename it to dashboard. Enter. Let me go back to the pivot tables itself. Let me take this slicer right here, and I'm going to move it to the new sheet. How can I do that? I can simply copy and paste. For sure, it's going to work. But I think it's a better idea to move it to the new sheet instead of duplicate it. Right click, go to cut, and then go to the new sheet dashboard, for example. Click on cell B2, right click, and then paste. That's it. Now we have our slicer, and you can change the area, adjust the area if you want to. Let me increase quite a bit more the height, maybe 0.5. I think it's way better to select the numbers. And because we already have the first pivot table, I think we can do here our first panels, starting our dashboard. And because we have only numbers in that pivot table, only one single value, we can do some cards. And how the card is going to work? We can select a couple of cells like I'm doing here, go to the Home tab, merge and center those cells. Because now instead of having one single small block, we have a large block that is a combination of multiple cells. We can do the same for the cells underneath. Merge and center, now select everything, go to borders, all borders. Let's say as the header, we want to make a different layout by changing the fill color to a dark blue, maybe the font color to white, And let's say I want to give it a name such as the name we have here in the first analysis, that is total amount. Let me go back to the dashboard and write right here, total amount, enter. And I also want to increase quite a bit the font size, organize, center, align the information in the middle, put everything in bold, maybe add a extra style right here. Okay, I think it's good enough. And how can I, by using the pivot table, return the value within this cell? We can use simply the equals sign. Go back to the pivot table sheet and select where we have our value and hit enter. Very simple, guys. We just need to adjust the formatting, maybe change to accounting, increase the font size quite a bit, align the middle, put everything in bold, use a different style right here. Maybe we can also change the background color as well. Let's use a gray for this example. And if I change here the months, as you guys can see, the card or the cell is going to also update the value. And if I clear the filter, we can see the whole result, the total amount. So it's already working. What I can do now, I can duplicate this card to match all the values I have here. So if I have 1, 2, 3, 4 different values, I can duplicate the card 3 times because I already have 1. So I need to duplicate it 3 more times. So select everything. We can use the Ctrl+C key to copy and then Ctrl+V to paste it. Let's say Ctrl+C, skip one row, and in the row underneath, Ctrl+V, Ctrl+V one more time, and then one more time. That's it. Now we have 4 sets of cards. The second card is going to be equal the second analysis we have in the pivot table, that is the total quantity. And we can also change the header to total quantity. However, we are not going to use, for this case, money. So let me change to number, and I want to decrease the decimal places to 0. As the third one, equals the average ticket. So let me change here the header as well, average ticket. Okay, this one is currency. And the last one equals the last value of our pivot table, that is the quantity of orders. Quantity of orders. Enter, and again, let's use a number formatting and decrease decimal places to 0. And every time I change here the month that I want to analyze, the pivot table is going to update. And by updating the pivot table, this formula that we did, that is actually the equal sign, also is going to return the current value. Okay, guys, now we did our first part of the dashboard. We can move on furthermore. Let's say we can be more specific with this pivot table that we have. Because right now we are seeing the total amount, the total quantity, the average ticket, and the quantity of orders. We can just exactly take the same information, but we can expand it. Let's say instead of only see the total amount, we can expand it to regions or to categories and etc. So let me select this whole pivot table, Ctrl+C, we can skip one column, and in the column to the right, we can paste it. Now we have 2 pivot tables. And for the second one, I want to remove everything but the total amount. Let me go here, remove everything, and I'm only keeping the total amount. And I want to analyze now by, let's say, by the product name. Click, hold, and drag the product name onto rows. Excel is going to give me a large list of products. All the products I have. 55 different products. Okay, we have a lot of different products. We can see how much we sold for each product. But because we have a lot of products, I don't think this random organization is the best, or in this case, Excel is going to organize from A to Z, alphabetical order. I always like to change to organize it by using the largest value at the top and the smallest one at the bottom. And to do that, we can go to the filter button and go to more sort options. And I want to use descending, that is the largest at the top and the smallest at the bottom. And I don't want to use the product name column as the reference. I want to use the total amount as the criterion. So click on those in this option and then click OK. Now it's very organized. The largest one is right here. That way I know straight jeans is the most sold product using the amount as a reference. Yoga mat is the least so the one. And okay, a type of chart that I think it's very interesting to analyze this data set, and why should I use a chart if I already have this pivot table? Because it's easier to analyze data through a chart than it is through a table. Because a chart has bars or columns that help us visualize the proportion, the size of the number. Right here, we only have numbers. But if we just take a look, we cannot properly see the difference between the first number and the last one. But if we have charts, as I said, we have slicers, columns, bars, and it's easier to understand the proportion between one and another because of the height, the size, the area, and etc. A cool chart that we can use right here is a bar chart. Let me show what I mean. Insert a bar chart. A bar chart is going to organize the information one at the bottom of another and also create those bars. The largest the bar, the largest the value. So it's easier to understand. However, we have a problem here. In the pivot table, we have the largest value at the top, but in the chart, we have the opposite, the largest value at the bottom. So how can we change this order? We can right click on those names. So right click on those names because Excel is going to open up those options and you can go straight to format axis. Right here, you have a plenty of different options, but the one that I'm looking for is the axis position. Let's mark the checkbox categories in reverse order. That's it. Now we have the same order as the pivot table. And if we right click on this chart, go to cut, and then go back to the dashboard, let's say I want to paste it on cell L2, right click and then paste it. Yeah, we already have our chart right here and it's working. If we change the slicers, as you guys can see, the chart also changes, updates. But right now we have too much information in the chart that is completely cluttered. We cannot see properly the information. So my idea here is to be a minimalist. Remove everything that we are not going to use, such as this product name filter right here. Because by this filter, I can choose only certain products. But I don't want to. I want to see everything. Let's say I want to remove basically everything from this chart. I can start by removing those gray frames, gray blocks that we have in the canvas of the chart. So we can go to pivot chart analyze, field buttons, and hide all. That's it. Now let me also hide the legend because it makes no sense. We only have one single chart. So what is the sense to see the legend? This doesn't make sense, right? So let me remove that. Also, let me remove the grid lines at the background and also those numbers at the top. But because we removed the numbers at the top, we don't know anymore how much, let's say, this bar here represents. I'm going to show you an alternative. But before we do that, let me click on the fill handle, click, hold, and drag downwards to increase the height of this chart. That's it. Now we can see all the different products. And on top of that, guys, we can also increase it's not the girth of the bars, but maybe the height, right? I know it's kind weird to say height because maybe height we can understand by the difference between the starting point and the ending point of the bar. But in this case, we are going to make the bars thicker. This is what I mean, thicker. Click on the bar, right click, go to format data series, and all the way here to the right, we have this gap width. Decrease the gap width pointing right here. Because as we can notice to the left, the bars becomes more thicker. And on top of that, we can also go to the painting bucket, change the fill color to maybe a darker one like this. Or if you want to, you can go to gradient fill because now we have this type of color that changes its shades. So we have shades of blues or shades of oranges. In my case, I want to use the darkest blue we have right here. That maybe this one. Okay. And remember what I said earlier? We don't know anymore how much each bar represents. For sure, by looking at the size of the bar, we know that dumbbell pair is bigger than this last option right here. However, we don't know how much Dembo pair represents. Is the difference only by one single dollar or $1,000? I don't know because we don't have numbers. What I want to do here, I want to go to design. All the way to the left, we have this add chart elements. Basically, those options allow us to toggle on and off each option we have on the chart. And I want to go to data labels and use the option outside and, because now we have the data labels displaying how much we have for each item. Very simple, very straightforward. And on the last thing maybe we can do here, or two more things. Click on in the chart, we need to be careful because always charts in Excel have two different areas. The plot area, that is this rectangle within the canvas of the chart, and the whole canvas itself. So two rectangles, two frames, the bigger frame and the smaller frame. The smaller frame refers to the plot area where we have the bars, the columns, the numbers, and etc. And this frame, this bigger one, is the canvas of the chart, is the whole thing. So this is what I mean. Click on the chart, so select the whole rectangle, the whole canvas. Because we can go to the paint bucket. No, I want to change the fill, but I want to add some borders. Solid line. Let me change the color to black. And let me close this panel and click on any cell. I think we're good right now. A very interesting layout. And the second thing that I said that I want to change is the title of the chart. Instead of total, what we have here, okay, it's total, but total amount, right? Total amount per category or per product in this case. Okay, guys, and if, again, we use the slicers, we can see everything. But I think it's too cluttered. So what we can do, we can add another slicer to filter by category. And we can decide if we want to filter by category this entire dashboard, including the cards and also the chart, or if we only want to filter the chart by category. I think we can filter everything to just make everything connected. And let me go back to the pivot table. We can click in the first or in the second, it doesn't matter. So let's click on the first one because I want to show you something. Click on the first pivot table, go to pivot table analyze and insert a new slicer. In this case, I want to insert a slicer by using the product category. And then, okay, we have many different categories right here. Let's say I want to take this slicer, right click, cut to the dashboard. Let me insert it just below the months. Let me paste right here. Let me increase the width. Let me increase the height quite a bit. Okay. Maybe we can divide into two different columns. Slicer, two columns, and I know, of course, maybe some categories are so long that we cannot properly see the whole text, but I'm going to leave that way because, in other hand, I need to increase too much the area of this slicer and I don't think it's a good idea. Let me just increase the height, maybe 0.4, increase quite a bit more the height of the slicer itself. And I want to change the color to a dark blue again. Yeah, that's it. Let's say I only want to see fitness category. Why is that? Why only the cards are being filtered for me? Because, guys, we inserted this slicer based on the first pivot table. And if you want a slicer to filter all the pivot tables you have, you need to connect the pivot tables. But why the month is filtering the whole thing, the two pivot tables we have? Because we basically copy and paste the pivot table and the slicer was already being applied. So we copy and paste all the properties of our pivot table. But in this case right here, we only insert this slicer from the first pivot table. So this is why we have this problem. But to solve is very simple. We can click on the second slicer, right click on it, go to report connections, and we can check all the pivot tables we want to apply this filtered. So let's go to OK, and now it's working. I can check here how many categories I want to see, and it's very simple. And I also have this option that is the mode selected, the icon. I can click on it to select multiple categories at once. Let's say I want to compare those categories in January, February, and March. Excel is going to give me here more data to compare the information I selected. And basically, guys, that's how we can create a dashboard in Excel. Very simple, right? We have the data set. From the data set, we create pivot tables. From the pivot table, we can organize it in such a fashion to have a beautiful design and to create our dashboard. The last tip I want to give you is if you click on the View tab, you can uncheck the grid lines because Excel is going to enable the lines that divides rows and columns. And I think we have a more professional layout by doing that. For sure, we could continue to input more and more charts here. The core idea is the same. You can continue to create pivot tables and then insert a chart, cut and paste it here in this area. Very simple. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video on how to create dashboards or analysis using Excel. And if you have any questions or any suggestions to the next videos, let me know, comment down below, because I see you in the next video.